Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into the perfumed, coal-lined, and incredibly savvy world of one of history's most iconic women, Cleopatra VII Philopator, the last active pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt. Forget the dramatic Hollywood portrayals for a moment. We're going to peek behind the silken curtains into her private chambers in Alexandria, circa sometime in the mid-1st century BCE. Imagine the gentle lapping of the Mediterranean against the harbor walls. The scent of exotic incense mingling with library papyrus from the great library nearby, and a queen. Not just born to power, but actively cultivating it, using every tool at her disposal, including a legendary beauty regimen. We're going to delve into how Cleopatra didn't just follow ancient beauty trends, she arguably perfected her own recipe, a potent blend of Egyptian tradition, Hellenistic sophistication, and personal ingenuity. You probably won't survive this deep dive into ancient cosmetics, botanical extracts, and queenly self-care without wanting to try a milk bath, or at least dramatically line your eyes with coal before your next Zoom meeting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from as the world spins. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the royal quarter of Alexandria, a city that was a dazzling jewel of the ancient world. Founded by Alexander the Great, it was a cosmopolitan hub of Greek and Egyptian culture, a center of learning, trade, and, of course, power. Cleopatra, born into this vibrant metropolis around 69 BCE, was not just an Egyptian queen. She was a Macedonian Greek, a descendant of Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander's generals. This dual heritage is crucial to understanding her approach to everything, including her public image and, yes, her beauty. She would have been immersed in two rich traditions, the ancient, elaborate cosmetic and ritual practices of Egypt, and the Hellenistic Greek ideals of beauty that prized naturalism, proportion, and a certain intellectual grace. The mainstream historical fact is that Alexandria, during Cleopatra's reign, was one of the largest and most influential cities in the Mediterranean world, boasting the famous library and the Pharos Lighthouse, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. It was a melting pot where Egyptian, Greek, Jewish, and other cultures interacted. So, Cleopatra's recipe for beauty wouldn't have been cooked up in a vacuum. She had access to centuries of Egyptian cosmetic knowledge. Think of those intricate tomb paintings depicting coal-eyed nobles and gods, or the discovery of cosmetic palettes dating back to pre-dynastic times. Egyptians were pioneers in skincare, makeup, and perfumery. They knew about moisturizing oils, anti-wrinkle creams. Yes, really, mono, and a vast array of pigments for adornment. At the same time, as a highly educated woman of Greek descent, fluent in multiple languages, she was famously the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn Egyptian. Cleopatra would also have been familiar with Greek ideals of beauty, which, while also valuing a well-groomed appearance, often emphasized a more natural look compared to the sometimes more stylized Egyptian aesthetic. She had the best of both worlds to draw upon. One quirky tidbit from this era is the sheer variety of ingredients that went into ancient cosmetics. Things like powdered galena, a lead ore for kohl, red ochre for lip and cheek color, malachite for green eyeshadow, and countless plant extracts, animal fats, and minerals. It was a veritable ancient apothecary. And some of these ingredients, like lead, were decidedly not FDA approved. Cleopatra, with the resources of a kingdom at her disposal, could experiment and refine these, sourcing the finest materials from across her realm and beyond. Historians still argue about Cleopatra's actual physical appearance, as contemporary coin portraits depict her with strong, rather than conventionally beautiful by modern or even some ancient Greek standards, features, a prominent nose, a determined chin. Yet Roman writers like Plutarch, who were often hostile to her, emphasized her irresistible charm, her captivating voice, and her intelligence, suggesting her beauty was as much about her presence and intellect as her physical attributes. This idea of a holistic recipe, not just what she put on her face, but what was behind it, will be a recurring theme. So, as you settle into this Alexandrian atmosphere, imagine a young Cleopatra navigating the complex politics of her court, absorbing the knowledge of her ancestors, and beginning to formulate her own unique approach to queenly allure. It wasn't just about looking good, it was about projecting power, divinity, and an intellect that could captivate Roman generals and rule a kingdom. The ingredients were all there. She just needed to perfect the blend. Cleopatra wasn't starting from scratch when it came to crafting her image. She was the inheritor of a long line of Ptolemaic rulers, a dynasty that, while Macedonian Greek in origin, had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries by the time she ascended the throne. And these Ptolemies, keenly aware they were foreign rulers in an ancient land, had developed their own traditions of royal presentation, blending Greek and Egyptian elements to legitimize their rule and project an image of divine authority and, yes, beauty. You are now, perhaps, in the royal palace, surrounded by the art and iconography of the Ptolemaic court. You'd see statues and reliefs depicting Cleopatra's ancestors. The various Ptolemies and their queens, often also named Cleopatra, Berenice, or Arsinoe. They weren't overly creative with names, which can make keeping track of them a bit like untangling a very regal but repetitive family tree. The Ptolemaic queens, in particular, played significant public and religious roles, and their depiction often emphasized both their Greek heritage and their adoption of Egyptian royal symbolism. The mainstream historical fact is that Ptolemaic queens were often powerful figures who co-ruled with their brothers who were also usually their husbands. Yes, sibling marriage was a Ptolemaic royal custom, adopted from earlier Egyptian pharaonic tradition, aimed at keeping the bloodline pure and consolidating power. This meant that queens like Cleopatra had a tradition of visible, active queenship to draw upon. Beauty standards in the Hellenistic world, which heavily influenced the Ptolemaic court. Prized features like a straight nose, full lips, a relatively pale complexion as it suggested a life lived indoors, away from manual labor, and an overall sense of proportion and harmony. Greek sculptures of goddesses like Aphrodite or Hera would have set the aesthetic benchmark. So, Cleopatra would have been aware of these ideals. Her education, which was extensive and Greek in nature, would have exposed her to Greek literature, philosophy, and art, all reinforcing these concepts of beauty. At the same time, as rulers of Egypt, the Ptolemies, including the queens, also adopted many Egyptian royal trappings. They were depicted in Egyptian-style dress, wearing Egyptian crowns and religious symbols, and participating in Egyptian religious rituals. This was crucial for connecting with their Egyptian subjects and for claiming the divine authority associated with the pharaohs. Egyptian beauty ideals, while also valuing youthfulness and symmetry, had their own distinct characteristics. The heavy kohl eyeliner, the elaborate wigs, the use of bright colors in makeup, the intricate jewelry. These were all part of a long and sophisticated tradition of personal adornment that was deeply intertwined with religious belief and social status. One quirky tidbit is that some Ptolemaic queens were deified during their lifetimes or posthumously, often associated with Greek goddesses like Aphrodite or Egyptian goddesses like Isis. Cleopatra herself would later be strongly identified with Isis. This divine association meant that their beauty was not just personal attractiveness, but a reflection of their divine status and power. So, if you're a queen goddess, your skincare routine isn't just self-care, it's practically a sacred duty. Must keep the divine visage glowing. You know, for the people. Historians still argue about how successfully the Ptolemies integrated these Greek and Egyptian elements in their self-presentation. Was it a seamless fusion? Or did it sometimes create a sense of cultural tension for Cleopatra, who was particularly adept at navigating both cultures? This inheritance was likely a rich palette from which to draw, She could emphasize her Greek features and education when dealing with Greeks or Romans, and her connection to Egyptian divinity and tradition when addressing her Egyptian subjects. Her recipe for beauty was thus, from the start, informed by this dual heritage. She had access to Greek cosmetic recipes, which often emphasized olive oil, honey, and plant-based ingredients for skincare, and more subtle forms of makeup. And she had the vast pharmacopoeia of Egyptian cosmetic knowledge, with its kohl, its perfumes, its complex unguents and pastes. She wasn't just Cleopatra the Greek or Cleopatra the Egyptian. She was Cleopatra the Ptolemy, heir to a unique cultural synthesis. And she would use all of it to her advantage. Her ancestors had laid the groundwork, establishing a tradition of powerful queens whose image was carefully cultivated. Cleopatra would take that inheritance and refine it, adding her own intellect, charisma, and political acumen to create a persona that would captivate the most powerful men in the world and secure her place in history. The family beauty secrets were probably quite something, passed down from queen to queen, alongside the secrets of state. As Cleopatra moved through her Alexandrian palace, surrounded by imagery that blended Greek and Egyptian motifs, she would have been acutely aware of another powerful tool in the royal beauty arsenal, the divine connection. For Egyptian pharaohs, and particularly for queens, an association with goddesses was not just a matter of personal piety, it was a crucial aspect of their legitimacy and their perceived power. Cleopatra, more than many of her Ptolemaic predecessors, masterfully wove this divine association into her public persona, and by extension, into her very recipe for beauty and allure. You find yourself now in a temple precinct, perhaps dedicated to Isis, one of the most important and beloved goddesses in the Egyptian pantheon, whose cult had also spread throughout the Hellenistic world. The air is thick with incense, kaifi, perhaps that complex, sacred Egyptian blend. Priests and priestesses in white linen robes move with solemn purpose. And here, Cleopatra herself might appear, not just as a queen, but as the living embodiment of Isis. The mainstream historical fact is that Cleopatra VII actively cultivated an identification with the goddess Isis. She was often referred to as the new Isis, and she appeared in public and in official imagery, dressed in the traditional attributes of the goddess, the horned solar disk, the Isis knot in her robe, sometimes even with vulture wings. This wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a profound political and religious claim. Isis was a multifaceted goddess, a devoted wife to Osiris, a loving mother to Horus, a powerful magician, a bringer of wisdom, and a symbol of queenship and feminine power. By identifying with Isis, Cleopatra was tapping into a deep well of religious devotion and associating herself with these potent divine qualities. Her beauty then became more than just physical attractiveness. It became a reflection of divine grace, wisdom, and authority. If she looked radiant, it was the radiance of the goddess shining through her. This divine aura would have been a powerful component of her allure, especially for her Egyptian subjects who revered Isis. But it wasn't just Isis. Egyptian queens had long associated themselves with other goddesses of beauty, love, and power, such as Hathor. Hathor, often depicted with cow horns and a solar disk, was the goddess of joy, love, music, dance, and feminine beauty. She was also a protective deity. The tools of Hathor's priestesses often included mirrors, highly polished bronze or silver, and cosmetic palettes. Emphasizing the sacredness of beauty rituals, Cleopatra, by embodying these goddesses, was essentially saying, "My beauty is not mere vanity. It is a divine attribute, a sign of my sacred role." One quirky tidbit is the symbolic meaning of some of the cosmetics themselves. Kohl, that iconic black eyeliner, wasn't just for making the eyes look bigger and more dramatic. It was believed to have protective magical properties. Warding off the evil eye and eye infections, some formulations did have mild antiseptic qualities, though the lead content was, again, problematic. Green eyeshadow, made from malachite, was associated with Hathor and symbolized new life and fertility. And when Cleopatra applied her makeup, it was, in a sense, a ritual act, imbuing her with divine protection and power. It's like your modern power lipstick, but with actual believed supernatural backup. Historians still argue about how literally Cleopatra and her contemporaries, especially the more Hellenized elite and visiting Romans, took this divine identification. Was it a sincere religious belief, a cynical political ploy, or something in between? A recognized symbolic language of power for Cleopatra, who was highly intelligent and politically astute. It was likely a sophisticated blend. She may have genuinely felt a connection to Isis, but she certainly understood the political utility of being seen as a living goddess. This divine dimension to her beauty meant that her recipe wasn't just about physical ingredients. It was also about cultivating an aura, a presence, a sense of being more than mortal. When she met Roman leaders like Julius Caesar or Mark Antony, she wasn't just presenting herself as a queen. She was presenting herself as a queen with the backing and the very essence of powerful ancient deities. This would have added an almost supernatural weight to her charm and her political negotiations. Imagine trying to say no to someone who not only controls a wealthy kingdom, but might also be able to call down the power of Isis if you annoy her. It adds a certain frisson to diplomatic relations. So, as Cleopatra perfected her beauty, she was also perfecting her divinity, ensuring that her allure was not just skin deep, but resonated with the power of the gods themselves. This made her beauty not just captivating, but awe-inspiring. Now, let's move from the divine and into the distinctly earthly, though no less legendary, aspects of Cleopatra's beauty regimen. If there's one beauty secret universally associated with her, it's the fabled milk and honey bath. You can almost picture it a lavishly appointed bathing chamber in the Alexandrian palace, steam rising from a large, perhaps marble or alabaster, tub filled not with mere water, but with creamy, fragrant ass's milk, sweetened with golden honey. Cleopatra herself, serene and regal, sinking into this opulent concoction. The mainstream historical fact is that bathing was a significant ritual in ancient Egypt, for both hygiene and pleasure, and various substances were added to bathwater for their skin-enhancing properties. While direct contemporary evidence specifically detailing Cleopatra's milk baths is scarce and comes mostly from later Roman writers like Pliny the Elder, who mentioned ass's milk as a treatment for wrinkles, the practice aligns with Egyptian knowledge of natural ingredients and their love of luxurious personal care. Ass's milk, in particular, was prized. It was believed to be rich in vitamins and minerals, and to have skin-softening and anti-aging properties. Lactic acid, naturally present in milk, is a gentle exfoliant, helping to remove dead skin cells and reveal smoother, brighter skin. It's basically an ancient chemical peel, but much more pleasant than some of the modern ones that leave you looking like you've had a close encounter with a particularly aggressive toaster. Honey. The other key ingredient is a natural humectant, meaning it attracts and retains moisture. It also has antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties. So, a milk and honey bath wouldn't just be a symbol of luxury, it would be a genuinely effective treatment for keeping the skin soft, hydrated, and youthful looking. Imagine the sensory experience, the warmth of the milk, the silky feel on the skin, the sweet, comforting aroma of honey. It's the ultimate spa treatment, fit for a queen. Cleopatra reportedly kept herds of donkeys, some say as many as 700, though this might be an exaggeration, to ensure a constant supply for her daily ablutions. Talk about dedication to skincare. That's a lot of braying to put up with for a smooth complexion. One quirky tidbit is that other luxurious additions might have been made to these baths. Flower petals, rose, jasmine, lotus would add to the fragrance and the visual appeal. Aromatic herbs or essential oils could be infused for their therapeutic or perfuming effects. It wasn't just about getting clean, it was a holistic ritual designed to soothe the senses, calm the mind, and beautify the body. It's a far cry from a quick shower with a bar of soap that smells vaguely of mountain rain. But milk and honey weren't just for bathing. They were also likely used in other skincare preparations. Honey could be used in facial masks, mixed with other ingredients like clay or oatmeal if they had a Roman equivalent of Quaker oats for its cleansing and moisturizing properties. Milk, or its derivatives like yogurt, could also be applied directly to the skin. Historians still argue about the exact scale and frequency of these luxurious baths. Were they a daily ritual or reserved for special occasions? And how much of the legend is later embellishment designed to emphasize Cleopatra's extravagance and exotic allure? While the specific details might be debated, the underlying principle, the use of natural, nourishing ingredients for skincare, is well in line with ancient Egyptian and Hellenistic practices. Cleopatra, someone with her access to resources and her keen intellect, would have undoubtedly sought out the most effective and luxurious treatments available. She wasn't just passively soaking, she was actively curating her skin's health and appearance. This dedication to skincare, this understanding of the benefits of natural ingredients, was a cornerstone of her beauty. Recipe. It wasn't about quick fixes or masking imperfections, it was about nurturing the skin, creating a healthy, radiant canvas for any further adornment. And as she relaxed in her fragrant, milky bath, surrounded by attendants, she wasn't just indulging, she was investing in her most powerful asset, her captivating, queenly presence. The soft lapping of the milk, the sweet scent of honey. These are the soothing sounds and smells of a beauty ritual perfected over centuries, and personalized by a queen who understood that true allure begins with feeling good in your own skin. Once her skin was perfectly prepped from that legendary milk and honey bath, or perhaps just a thorough cleanse with some fine Egyptian natron and perfumed oil, it was time for one of the most distinctive and iconic elements of ancient Egyptian beauty. An art form Cleopatra undoubtedly mastered the application of eye makeup, particularly kohl. You're now in Cleopatra's private dressing chamber. Attendants move quietly, presenting her with small, beautifully crafted cosmetic pots made of alabaster, faience, or polished stone, alongside delicate applicators of wood, ivory, or bronze. Mirrors, highly polished discs of silver or bronze, reflect her image in their slightly hazy, mysterious way. And the focus, the absolute centerpiece of this ritual, is the eyes. The mainstream historical fact is that both men and women in ancient Egypt, from the highest pharaoh to common laborers, used kohl eyeliner. It was not merely a fashion statement, but also had practical and religious significance. The kohl created that dramatic, almond-shaped eye that is so emblematic of Egyptian art. It was believed to protect the eyes from the harsh glare of the sun, a kind of ancient sunglass effect, to ward off flies and other insects, and, as we mentioned earlier, to have magical protective qualities against the evil eye and eye diseases. The kohl itself was typically made from powdered galena, a dark gray lead sulfide ore for black, or sometimes from soot mixed with oil or animal fat. Green eye makeup, also very popular, was made from powdered malachite, a green copper carbonate mineral. These minerals would be ground into a fine powder on cosmetic palettes, often beautifully carved stone slabs, and then mixed with a little water, oil, or fat to create a paste that could be applied with a thin stick or brush. Cleopatra's application would have been an art. It wasn't just a quick swipe. The lines would be precise, extending from the inner corner of the eye out towards the temples, often with a stylized tail that enhanced the almond shape. Sometimes a double line was drawn, one along the upper lash line and one along the lower. The thickness and length of the lines could vary, perhaps to suit the occasion or the queen's mood. Imagine her steady-handed, or perhaps an attendant equally skilled, meticulously drawing those iconic lines, transforming her eyes into captivating pools of mystery and power. It was a process that required focus and skill. One quirky tidbit is the sheer variety and artistry of ancient Egyptian cosmetic containers and applicators that archaeologists have unearthed. Tiny kohl tubes, often in the shape of palm columns or decorated with animal figures, little pots for eyeshadows and unguents, slender kohl sticks. These were not just utilitarian objects. They were miniature works of art, reflecting the importance placed on cosmetic rituals. Cleopatra's personal collection must have been exquisite, filled with treasures made of precious materials, perhaps gifts from foreign dignitaries or crafted by the finest artisans in Alexandria. Maybe she had a favorite coal pot, one that always brought her good luck before an important meeting with, say, a certain Roman general. Eyebrows were also given attention. They were often darkened and defined, sometimes plucked or shaved and then drawn in a graceful arch, further framing the eyes. Historians still argue about the exact composition of some ancient Egyptian cosmetics and the long-term health effects of using lead-based products like galena coal. While some studies suggest that small amounts of lead compounds, when specially prepared, might have stimulated nitric oxide production in the skin, boosting the immune response against eye infections. The cumulative effect of regular lead application is, by modern standards, a serious concern. However, in their context, the perceived benefits, aesthetic, practical, and magical, clearly outweighed any then unknown risks. Cleopatra, with her access to the best knowledge of her time, would have used the finest, most carefully prepared coal. Her gaze, already reputed to be intelligent and captivating, would have been intensified by this dramatic framing. It drew attention to her eyes, the proverbial windows to the soul, and in her case, the windows to a very sharp, politically astute mind. The coal wasn't just makeup, it was a statement of identity, a link to ancient Egyptian tradition, and a tool for enhancing her already considerable personal magnetism. Those dark, alluring eyes looking out from history are a testament to a beauty recipe that perfectly blended art, ritual, and a deep understanding of visual power. With her eyes dramatically defined by kohl, Cleopatra's next step in perfecting her queenly visage would involve adding subtle, or perhaps sometimes not so subtle, color to her lips and cheeks. You're still in her dressing chamber, the air faintly scented with rare perfumes. Having addressed the windows to her soul, it's time for the finishing touches that would bring warmth and vibrancy to her complexion, all achieved with the natural pigments available in her ancient world. The ancient Egyptians, and by extension the Ptolemaic court, had a sophisticated understanding of how to extract and use colorants from both mineral and plant sources. For lip and cheek color, one of the most common ingredients was red ochre. The mainstream historical fact is that red ochre, a natural clay earth pigment rich in iron oxide, was widely used in ancient Egypt for cosmetic purposes, as well as in art and funerary practices for millennia. It could be ground into a fine powder and mixed with water, oil, or fat to create a paste or cream that could be applied to the lips and cheeks. Depending on the source of the ochre and how it was prepared, it could produce a range of shades, from soft rosy pinks to deep, earthy reds. Cleopatra would have had access to the finest quality ochre, perhaps imported from specific mines known for their rich color. The application would have been careful. A touch of red on the lips could make them appear fuller and more alluring. A subtle flush of color on the cheeks could give the impression of youth and vitality. Unlike some modern makeup trends that go for bold, statement lips, the aim here was often a more natural-looking enhancement, though for ceremonial occasions, a more dramatic look might have been favored. It wasn't just about slapping on some rouge, it was about skillfully blending and applying the color to complement her features and her overall presentation. Henna was another versatile plant-based colorant. While most famously used for dyeing hair and creating temporary body art like mehndi, which has ancient roots in Egypt and other cultures, henna could also be used to stain the lips and fingernails a reddish-brown hue. Cleopatra might have used henna for a longer-lasting lip color, or to give her nails a polished, well-groomed appearance. Imagine the delicate process of applying henna paste and waiting for the color to develop. A slow beauty ritual. One quirky tidbit relates to some of the more adventurous unit ingredients that were sometimes used for red pigment. Some sources mention the use of crushed carmine beetles cochineal to produce a vibrant crimson dye. While more commonly associated with later periods or other cultures like the Aztecs for cochineal, the Egyptians were resourceful. However, for a queen like Cleopatra, who also identified with the goddess Isis, often depicted with a more serene and natural palette, it's perhaps more likely she favored refined ochres and plant-based stains for her daily wear. Maybe save the beetle juice for a particularly wild feast day. Other plant extracts could have been used as well. The root of the alkanet plant, for example, can produce a reddish dye and has been used historically as a colorant for cosmetics and textiles. The fruits and flowers of various plants might also have yielded fugitive or temporary stains. The key was understanding the properties of these natural materials, how to extract the color, how to make it adhere to the skin, and how to achieve the desired shade. Historians still argue about the precise formulas and application techniques for many ancient Egyptian cosmetics. As detailed recipes are rare, much of our knowledge comes from analyzing residues found in cosmetic pots, examining artistic depictions, and interpreting ancient texts that sometimes allude to these practices. It's like a giant, ancient beauty puzzle. Cleopatra, with her renowned intelligence and access to scholars and alchemists in Alexandria, which was a center for early chemical experimentation, might well have experimented with and refined these traditional formulas. Perhaps she had her own personal lab, where new pigments were tested, or where ingredients were infused with specific perfumes to create a multi-sensory cosmetic experience. Her use of color would have been strategic. A subtle flush for a private audience, a bolder lip for a public ceremony. Each choice would contribute to the overall image she wished to project: powerful, divine, alluring, intelligent. It wasn't just about fashion, it was about communication, using the language of color to enhance her natural features and underscore her royal status. The natural pigments, carefully chosen and skillfully applied, were another vital ingredient in her carefully perfected recipe for queenly beauty. Cleopatra has attended to her skin, her eyes, her lips, and cheeks. The visual elements of her beauty are falling into place. But there's another, equally potent, and perhaps even more evocative, dimension to ancient allure that she would have masterfully employed: fragrance. You are now enveloped in a cloud of exquisite scent, not overpowering, but complex and lingering. This is the aroma of Cleopatra's court and of the queen herself, a testament to the ancient Egyptian and Hellenistic obsession with perfumes, incense, and essential oils. The mainstream historical fact is that ancient Egyptians were renowned for their sophisticated perfumery, using a vast array of aromatic resins, flowers, herbs, spices, and oils to create complex fragrances for personal use, religious rituals, and embalming. Perfumes were not just a luxury, they were an integral part of daily life and religious practice, believed to connect mortals with the divine. Cleopatra, as Queen of Egypt, would have had access to the rarest and most precious aromatic ingredients from across her kingdom and through extensive trade routes. Think of frankincense and myrrh from Arabia and the Horn of Africa, their smoky, resinous scents filling temples and palaces. Cinnamon and cassia from the Far East, adding warm, spicy notes. Spikenard from the Himalayas, a precious earthy perfume. And, of course, native Egyptian botanicals, blue lotus, with its intoxicating, slightly psychoactive aroma. Jasmine, henna flowers, and various aromatic reeds and grasses. These ingredients would be painstakingly processed, infused in oil, often moringa oil, bolanos oil, or olive oil. As alcohol distillation wasn't used for perfumes then, pressed or rendered into unguents and pomades, Cleopatra's personal perfume would have been her signature, a unique blend crafted specifically for her, designed to be both alluring and to project an image of exoticism and power. Plutarch famously describes her arrival to meet Mark Antony at Tarsus. She sailed up the river Cydnus in a barge with a gilded stern, purple sails, and silver oars, while she herself reclined under a gold-spangled canopy, dressed as Venus Aphrodite. And, crucially, perfumes diffused from the vessel to the shore, which was covered with multitudes. This wasn't just a dab behind the ears, this was fragrance as psychological warfare, an olfactory announcement of her divine and irresistible presence. One quirky tidbit is the legendary Egyptian perfume known as kai. This was a complex, blended incense, often containing 16 or more ingredients, including things like juniper, cinnamon, myrrh, frankincense, calamus, and raisins. It was burned in temples in the evening to purify the air and create a sacred, tranquil atmosphere. It was also said to have calming and sleep-inducing properties. Cleopatra might well have used kai in her personal chambers, not just for its beautiful aroma, but perhaps to help her unwind after a stressful day of ruling a kingdom and dealing with Roman generals. Another crisis with the grain supply. Someone light the kai. I need to chill. 8. Essential oils. Extracted through processes like enfleurage, pressing flowers into fat to capture their scent, or maceration in oil, would have been key components of her beauty routine. Rose oil, jasmine oil, lily oil. These would be used to perfume her skin, her hair, her clothing. Unguents, scented fats or oils would be applied to the body to moisturize and leave a lingering fragrance. Cones of scented fat were sometimes worn on the head during banquets. As the evening progressed and the room warmed, the cone would slowly melt, releasing its perfume down the hair and shoulders. A bit messy, perhaps, but undeniably fragrant. Historians and archaeochemists still work to recreate ancient Egyptian perfumes based on textual descriptions and analysis of residues found in perfume jars. It's a fragrant detective story, trying to identify the precise ingredients and methods used to create these long-lost scents. Was Cleopatra's signature scent heavy on the lotus, or did she prefer spicier, more resinous notes? We can only imagine, but it was undoubtedly memorable. Her recipe for beauty was therefore not just visual, it was an immersive, multi-sensory experience. The way she smelled would have been as carefully curated as her kohl-lined eyes or her regal attire. It was another layer of her allure, a subtle but powerful tool for enchantment and influence. As you drift off, imagine that soft, exotic fragrance, a whisper from ancient Alexandria, a scent fit for a queen who knew that true beauty captivates all the senses. Cleopatra's face is now a masterpiece of subtle artistry, her skin glowing, her eyes captivating, her lips and cheeks imbued with natural color, and her presence enveloped in a cloud of exquisite perfume. But the ensemble is not yet complete. The crowning glory, quite literally, would be her hair and the elaborate headdresses she wore, further enhancing her regal and divine image. You are now observing the intricate process of styling Cleopatra's hair, or, more accurately, styling her wig, as elaborate wigs were a common and highly fashionable element of ancient Egyptian adornment for both men and women of high status. And Cleopatra, blending Egyptian and Hellenistic styles, would have certainly utilized them. The mainstream historical fact is that ancient Egyptians, including royalty, frequently wore wigs made from human hair, or sometimes plant fibers or animal hair. These wigs served multiple purposes. They protected the natural hair or shaved head from the sun and lice, a common problem, allowed for elaborate and unchanging hairstyles that would be difficult to achieve with natural hair alone, and were important symbols of status and occasion. Cleopatra's own natural hair was likely dark, as was typical for people of Mediterranean heritage. But her wigs could be any color or style she desired, though typically they would be black or very dark brown, meticulously plaited, curled, or arranged in complex tiers. For daily wear, she might have favored a more recognizably Hellenistic style, perhaps with her hair drawn back in a bun. A melon coiffure was popular in the Greek world, or with soft curls framing her face, often adorned with a simple diadem. This would emphasize her Greek heritage. But for ceremonial occasions, or when she wished to fully embody her role as an Egyptian pharaoh and the new Isis, she would have worn more elaborate Egyptian-style wigs, These could be long and heavy, with intricate braids, beads, and gold ornaments woven in. One particularly iconic Egyptian hairstyle involved numerous thin, tight braids or dreadlock-like strands, sometimes cut in a distinctive tripartite style falling on either side of the face and down the back. Headdresses were just as important as the wigs. As queen, Cleopatra had a range of symbolic crowns and diadems at her disposal. The simple diadem, a band of gold or precious metal worn around the head, was a common Hellenistic symbol of royalty, but she also wore traditional Egyptian crowns. For instance, the vulture headdress, associated with goddesses like Isis and Mut, and worn by Egyptian queens, signified divine motherhood and protection. Imagine Cleopatra wearing a headdress shaped like a vulture, spreading its wings protectively over her head, its golden feathers glinting. Then there was the uraeus, the rearing cobra, a symbol of royal power and divine authority, often worn on the brow of pharaohs and queens. It was believed to spit fire at the enemies of the ruler. Having a cobra on your forehead is a pretty clear, "do not mess with me" statement. One quirky tidbit is the sheer weight and complexity of some of these ceremonial wigs and headdresses. They must have required considerable poise and neck strength to wear, especially for extended periods during long rituals or public appearances. It's a good thing queens had attendants to help them get dressed. You wouldn't want to try and balance a solid gold vulture on your head by yourself first thing in the morning. Just a light headdress today, I think. The double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt feels a bit much before my morning cup of infused barley water. Hair care itself was also important, whether for natural hair or for maintaining the wigs. Oils, such as castor oil or almond oil, were used to condition the hair and scalp. Henna could be used to dye hair reddish-brown or to cover any gray. Combs of wood or ivory and elaborate hairpins have been found in abundance. Historians still argue about the specific details of Cleopatra's most famous look, particularly the one she might have adopted to meet Caesar or Antony. Was it purely Egyptian, purely Greek, or a deliberate and politically astute fusion of both? Given her intelligence, the latter seems most likely. She would have chosen her hairstyle and headdress as carefully as she chose her words or her perfumes, tailoring her appearance to the specific audience and the message she wished to convey. Her hair and headdresses were not just accessories, they were powerful symbols of her lineage, her authority, her divinity, and her understanding of the visual language of power. They framed her famous face, drawing attention to her captivating eyes and intelligent expression. Completing the recipe for a queen whose image was as carefully constructed as it was undeniably effective, Cleopatra, with her Alexandrian base, was strategically positioned not just for political maneuvering and trade, but also for accessing unique and potent natural ingredients for her renowned beauty regimen. While Egypt itself was rich in botanical resources, her influence and the trade routes converging on Alexandria gave her access to exotic goods from afar. And some of the most intriguing of these may have come from a rather unusual and mineral-rich source, the Dead Sea. You find yourself now, in your mind's eye, on the shores of that remarkable body of water, the Dead Sea, known in antiquity as Lake Asphaltites. The air is dry, the sun intense, and the water before you is unnaturally buoyant, leaving a salty, slightly oily residue on anything it touches. The landscape is stark, almost lunar, but beneath its barren surface lie treasures that were highly prized in the ancient world for their therapeutic and cosmetic properties. The mainstream historical fact is that the Dead Sea has been famous since antiquity for its exceptionally high concentration of salts and minerals, such as magnesium, sodium, potassium, calcium, and bromide. These minerals were believed to have beneficial effects on the skin and to alleviate various ailments. Herod the Great, a contemporary of Cleopatra and a sometime ally, sometime rival in the complex politics of the region, famously built fortresses and health spas around the Dead Sea, including Masada. It's highly plausible, given her interest in beauty and pharmacology, and her political connections, which at times extended to control over parts of Judea near the Dead Sea. that Cleopatra would have had access to and utilized these unique resources. What could she have used? Dead Sea salts themselves would have been a prized commodity. Dissolved in a bath, they could help to soothe tired muscles, reduce inflammation, and perhaps even alleviate skin conditions like psoriasis or eczema, though ancient diagnostic categories would differ from ours. The high mineral content could also help to detoxify and remineralize the skin. Imagine Cleopatra, after a long day of dictating decrees and managing international relations, enjoying a relaxing soak in water enriched with these potent salts. A far cry from her creamy milk baths, but perhaps equally beneficial in its own way. Then there's the famous Dead Sea mud. This dark, mineral-rich mud, found along the shores, was and still is used for therapeutic and cosmetic mud packs and masks. Applied to the skin, it was believed to draw out impurities, exfoliate dead skin cells, improve circulation, and leave the skin feeling firm and rejuvenated. Cleopatra might have had regular consignments of this precious mud delivered to her palace in Alexandria. You can picture her, perhaps in a private courtyard, attended by her ladies, having a Dead Sea mud mask applied, looking rather like a very regal bog monster for a short while, all in the name of flawless skin. Don't disturb me for the next hour. I'm communing with the primordial ooze, and bring me some chilled cucumber slices for my eyes. There's a deer. One quirky tidbit is that bitumen, or asphalt, also seeps naturally from the Dead Sea, hence its ancient name. Lake asphaltites. While not primarily a cosmetic ingredient, bitumen had various uses in the ancient world, including as an adhesive, for waterproofing, and even in mummification. It's unlikely Cleopatra was smearing raw asphalt on her face, but the presence of such unique geological phenomena in the region underscores its unusual nature. Perhaps her court alchemists or physicians experimented with refined derivatives for some obscure purpose. Historians still argue about the exact extent of Cleopatra's control over the Dead Sea region and its resources. Some ancient sources, like Josephus, suggest that Mark Antony gifted her valuable date palm and balsam groves. Near Jericho, balsam was a highly prized aromatic resin used in perfumes and medicines, and that she may have leased rights to harvest bitumen from the Dead Sea from Herod. Whether she had a full-blown Dead Sea cosmetics franchise is debatable, but her access to its products is highly probable. These ingredients, the salts, the mud, perhaps even the unique desert plants that grew in the vicinity, would have added another layer of exclusivity and efficacy to her beauty. Recipe. They were not everyday items available to just anyone. They were part of the rarefied toolkit of a queen who understood the power of nature and who sought out the most potent ingredients. From the fertile banks of the Nile to the saline shores of the Dead Sea, to maintain her legendary allure, the slightly salty tang in the air, the feeling of mineral-rich clay drying on your skin. These are the sensations of an ancient, natural spa, perfected by a queen. Cleopatra's pursuit of beauty and allure wasn't just about readily available natural ingredients like milk, honey, or Dead Sea mud. As a queen of immense wealth and a ruler with a flair for the dramatic, she also had access to, and likely indulged in, truly luxurious and sometimes exotic additives and elixirs. These were the ingredients that would elevate her beauty regimen from merely effective to legendarily opulent, blurring the lines between cosmetics, medicine, and conspicuous consumption. You are now imagining the most exclusive section of Cleopatra's private chambers, a kind of royal laboratory boudoir where rare substances are carefully stored in ornate vessels of gold, silver, and carved stone. Here, ingredients sourced from the farthest reaches of her known world, and perhaps some of purely legendary potency, are compounded into her personal potions. The mainstream historical fact is that luxury ingredients like gold, pearls, and rare imported spices and resins were indeed used in ancient high-status cosmetics and medicines, though their actual efficacy according to modern science is often questionable. Their value lay as much in their rarity and symbolism as in any proven benefit. Gold, for instance, tiny flakes of gold or gold dust might have been incorporated into facial masks or creams. Gold was associated with the sun, with divinity, with immortality, the flesh of the gods in Egyptian belief. Applying gold to the skin was perhaps thought to impart some of this divine radiance and eternal youth. While gold itself is relatively inert and unlikely to have significant direct skincare benefits, though some modern luxury brands still use it, the sheer opulence of a gold-infused face mask would have been a statement in itself. Yes, that's 24-karat radiance you're seeing. Standard Tuesday. Then there's the famous story of Cleopatra dissolving a pearl in vinegar and drinking it, usually cited as a way to win a bet with Mark Antony about who could host the most expensive banquet. While this anecdote primarily illustrates her extravagance and her ability to astonish, pearls or crushed pearl powder were also sometimes believed to have cosmetic properties in various ancient cultures, thought to brighten the skin or provide valuable minerals. Whether Cleopatra regularly ground up her jewelry for her face cream is doubtful, but the legend highlights the association of precious gems and materials with elite beauty. One quirky tidbit concerns the use of animal-derived ingredients. We've mentioned animal fats as a base for kohl and unguents, but more exotic substances might have been employed. For instance, civet musk from the civet cat and true musk from the musk deer were highly prized in perfumery for their potent, long-lasting, and fixative qualities. These would have been incredibly expensive and imported from distant lands. Lanolin, derived from sheep's wool, is an excellent emollient and was likely known. Even things like crocodile dung were, believe it or not, sometimes mentioned in ancient texts for alleged skin lightening or blemish-removing properties, though one hopes Cleopatra had access to more pleasant alternatives for her daily routine. That's one ingredient callback I'm happy to leave in the quirky and fringe category for her. Rare gums and resins, beyond the common frankincense and myrrh, would have been sought for perfumes and cosmetic preparations. Galbanum, opopanax, storax. These names might sound obscure now, but they were valuable aromatic components in antiquity. Cleopatra, with Alexandria as a major trading hub, could source these from Persia, India, and beyond. Historians still argue about which of these legendary ingredients were genuinely part of Cleopatra's regular regimen and which are later embellishments or symbolic attributions. Did she really bathe in ass's milk daily? Or was it an occasional luxury? Did she truly use gold in her face creams? Or is this a reflection of her legendary wealth? It's difficult to separate historical practice from the myth-making that has always surrounded her. What is clear is that her status allowed her to procure and experiment with the most expensive and sought-after ingredients known to her world. Her beauty recipe wasn't just about efficacy, it was about exclusivity, luxury, and the projection of an image of almost limitless resources. These precious, sometimes bizarre, elixirs and additives contributed to her mystique, making her beauty seem not just achieved, but almost alchemical, a result of arcane knowledge and unparalleled wealth. Each rare ingredient was another testament to her power and her ability to command the treasures of the earth for her personal adornment. We've spent a good deal of time in Cleopatra's hypothetical boudoir, surrounded by pots of kohl, flagons of ass's milk, and jars of exotic unguents. But to truly understand Cleopatra's recipe for beauty, the one that captivated Roman generals and has fascinated historians for 2 millennia, we need to step outside the dressing chamber. Because her most potent ingredients weren't applied with a kohl stick or mixed into a face mask, they were qualities of her mind, her voice, and her captivating personality. You are now present at a diplomatic banquet in the Alexandrian palace. Cleopatra is reclining on a gilded couch, not just a beautiful woman, but a queen in command. Roman envoys, or perhaps even Caesar or Antony themselves, are present. The conversation flows, and it quickly becomes apparent that Cleopatra's allure is far more than skin deep. The mainstream historical fact, attested to by ancient writers like Plutarch, is that Cleopatra's physical beauty, while present, was not her most remarkable asset. Instead, it was her intellect, her charm, her wit, and the captivating quality of her voice that made her irresistible. Plutarch, who wasn't exactly a fan of hers politically, wrote that her actual beauty, it is said, was not in itself so remarkable that none could be compared with her, or that no one could see her without being struck by it, but the contact of her presence, if you lived with her, was irresistible. The attraction of her person, joining with the charm of her conversation, and the character that attended all she said or did, was something bewitching. I geese. That's a pretty powerful endorsement from a historian who often portrayed her as a cunning manipulator. Her intellect was formidable. She was highly educated in the Greek tradition, knowledgeable in literature, philosophy, and mathematics. Unusually for a Ptolemaic ruler, she also learned to speak multiple languages, including Egyptian, which endeared her to her native subjects, Ethiopian, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Parthian, among others. This linguistic skill was not just a party trick, it was a powerful diplomatic tool, allowing her to converse directly with foreign dignitaries without relying solely on translators, fostering a more personal and persuasive connection. Imagine trying to negotiate a trade deal or a military alliance with a queen who can switch effortlessly into your own tongue, demonstrating respect and a keen understanding of your culture. One quirky tidbit is the description of her voice. Plutarch says it was like an instrument of many strings. She could pass from one language to another. Other writers praised its melodic quality. In an age before microphones and mass media, a beautiful and persuasive speaking voice was a significant asset for any public figure, especially a woman seeking to command attention and respect in a male-dominated world. Her voice wasn't just for sweet nothings, it was for delivering compelling arguments, witty rejoinders, and royal decrees. Then there was her charm and wit. She was reportedly a brilliant conversationalist, able to discuss a wide range of subjects with intelligence and humor. She could be playful, serious, learned, or seductive, adapting her approach to her audience and her objectives. This wasn't just superficial charm, it was backed by genuine intellectual substance. She could hold her own in discussions with seasoned politicians and philosophers. Historians still argue about the precise balance between Cleopatra's calculated use of her charms for political ends and any genuine affection she may have felt for men like Caesar or Antony. Was she always the master strategist, using her allure as a weapon, or was she also a woman capable of deep passion and personal connection, whose relationships were complicated by the immense political stakes involved? It was likely a complex mix. What is clear is that her beauty recipe was a holistic one. The kohl, the perfumes, the regal attire, these were the outward trappings, designed to create an impression of divine authority and captivating allure, but they were animated and given true power by the formidable intellect, the sharp wit, the multilingual eloquence, and the sheer force of personality that lay beneath. She understood that true beauty, the kind that sways empires, isn't just about a pretty face. It's about the entire package. It's about presence, charisma, and the ability to connect with and influence others on multiple levels. Her physical beauty preparations were just one part of a much larger, more complex, and ultimately more powerful recipe for queenly success. The true magic was in the woman herself. Cleopatra, armed with her keen intellect, her captivating charm, and yes, her meticulously cultivated physical appearance, was not just a queen who happened to be beautiful, she was a queen who understood that beauty, or rather the presentation of allure and regal splendor, could be a potent instrument of political power. In the high-stakes world of Hellenistic dynastic struggles and Roman imperial expansion, every advantage counted, and Cleopatra wielded her multifaceted beauty with strategic brilliance. You are now witnessing one of her famous encounters with a powerful Roman leader. Perhaps it's her legendary introduction to Julius Caesar, smuggled into the palace in Alexandria according to Plutarch, rolled up in a carpet or bed sack, to bypass her brother's guards. Or maybe it's her even more theatrical arrival to meet Mark Antony at Tarsus, sailing up the river Cydnus on that perfumed, gilded barge, dressed as the goddess Venus Aphrodite. These were not just romantic rendezvous, they were carefully staged political performances. The mainstream historical fact is that Cleopatra's relationships with both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were pivotal not only for her own reign but also for the course of Roman history. These alliances secured her throne and provided Egypt with a powerful Roman protector, at least for a time. And her personal magnetism and cultivated image were undeniably key factors in forging these crucial connections. When she met Caesar, she was a young queen struggling for her throne against her brother Ptolemy the Thegned. She needed Caesar's support. By arranging that daring, unconventional meeting, she not only gained access to him but also made an unforgettable first impression. It showcased her courage, her resourcefulness, and, of course, her captivating presence. She wasn't just another supplicant foreign royal, she was a woman of drama and daring, someone who commanded attention. Similarly, her meeting with Antony was a masterclass in strategic splendor. Antony had summoned her to Tarsus to answer questions about her loyalty. Instead of arriving as a nervous vassal, she staged an arrival so opulent, so divinely beautiful, appearing as Venus, goddess of love, to Antony, who often styled himself as Dionysus, that she completely captivated him and turned the tables, with him becoming her guest and, famously, her lover and ally. This wasn't just about seduction, it was about projecting an image of immense wealth, divine favor, and cultural sophistication that matched, or even outshone, Rome's. One quirky tidbit is the attention to detail in these presentations. For the Tarsus meeting, the purple sails of her barge were hugely symbolic. Purple dye was incredibly expensive, a mark of supreme royalty. The silver oars, the music, the perfumes. Every element was designed to overwhelm the senses and create an aura of almost supernatural magnificence. It's like the ultimate product launch, with Cleopatra herself as the irresistible new offering. Experience the Queen of Egypt now with more divine radiance and 20% extra strategic alliance. Her appearance was also tailored to her audience. When dealing with Romans, she could emphasize her Hellenistic learning and sophistication, presenting herself as an intellectual peer. For her Egyptian subjects, as we've seen, she embodied the goddess Isis, tapping into ancient religious traditions. This ability to adapt her presentation, to understand the cultural language of those she sought to influence, was a key part of her political genius. Historians still argue about the degree to which Roman propaganda, particularly from her enemy Octavian, later Augustus, distorted Cleopatra's image, portraying her as a decadent, overly sexualized foreign temptress who corrupted noble Roman men. While she certainly used her allure, Octavian's campaign aimed to delegitimize her and Antony, and much of the femme fatale image that has come down through history is colored by this hostile Roman perspective. The reality was likely more nuanced. She was a shrewd political operator who understood that in a world dominated by powerful men, her femininity, her intellect, and her carefully constructed image of beauty and divinity were among her most effective tools. She used them not just for personal vanity, but for the survival and prosperity of her kingdom. Her recipe for beauty was thus inextricably linked to her recipe for rule. Each public appearance, each diplomatic encounter, was an opportunity to reinforce her authority, her mystique, and her indispensability. Her beauty wasn't just a passive attribute, it was an active strategy, a dazzling component of her political arsenal. Beyond the coal pots, milk baths, and fragrant oils, Cleopatra's recipe for beauty would have drawn deeply from another vast and ancient source of knowledge available to her, the rich botanical pharmacopoeia of Egypt and the wider Mediterranean and Eastern worlds. The ancient Egyptians possessed an extensive understanding of plants and their medicinal and cosmetic properties, a tradition of herbalism that had been developed and recorded over millennia. You're now in a quiet, fragrant herb garden within the palace grounds in Alexandria, or perhaps browse through scrolls in a section of the great library dedicated to medicine and botany. The air is filled with the scent of crushed leaves, dried flowers, and aromatic resins. Here, physicians, priests, and scholars would study and catalog the properties of countless plants. Cleopatra, known for her keen intellect and her interest in scholarly pursuits, some ancient sources even credit her with writing medical or cosmetic treatises. Though these are lost, would have undoubtedly taken a keen interest in this botanical knowledge. The mainstream historical fact is that ancient Egyptian medical papyri, such as the Ebers Papyrus dating to around 1550 BCE but containing much older material, list hundreds of medicinal and cosmetic recipes using plant-based ingredients. These texts demonstrate a sophisticated, if sometimes magical, understanding of herbal remedies for everything from wrinkles and hair loss to more serious ailments. Cleopatra's court would have been a center for such learning. What kind of plants might have featured in her cosmetic arsenal? Aloe vera, for its soothing and moisturizing properties, was well known and likely used to treat sunburn, a real concern under the Egyptian sun, even for a queen who probably had parasol bearers and to hydrate the skin. Castor oil, moringa oil, and almond oil were used as emollients, hair conditioners, and as bases for perfumes and unguents. We've mentioned henna for coloring hair, lips, and nails. Myrrh and frankincense, tree resins, were not just for incense. They also have astringent and antiseptic properties and were used in skincare preparations. Perhaps in early anti-aging creams or treatments for blemishes. One quirky tidbit is the ancient Egyptian use of fenugreek. Fenugreek seeds must have, when soaked, produce a mucilaginous substance that was used to soften and smooth the skin. It was also believed to have properties that could enhance breast firmness. Whether Cleopatra indulged in fenugreek-based body wraps is pure speculation, but it's the kind of specific, traditional knowledge that might have been part of the royal beauty repertoire. Just off from my weekly fenugreeking, tell Rome I'll call them back. Flowers, of course, played a huge role, not just for their scent, but also for their properties. Rose water, made from steeping rose petals, would have been a gentle toner and perfume. Blue lotus, sacred and symbolic, was not only fragrant but also had mild psychoactive properties. Its essence might have been used in oils or perfumes to create a sense of euphoria or divine connection. Chamomile could be used for its calming and anti-inflammatory effects, perhaps in eye compresses or skin soothers. The list goes on. Figs, their enzymes can exfoliate, dates moisturizing, olives and olive oil a staple for skin and hair, pomegranate antioxidant rich, as we know from Persephone's story, but also used cosmetically. Cleopatra's knowledge wouldn't have been just anecdotal. Alexandria was a hub for physicians and scholars who were studying and systematizing medical and botanical knowledge. Figures like Herophilus and Erasistratus, pioneers of anatomy and physiology, had worked in Alexandria in earlier Ptolemaic times. While their focus was primarily medical, the lines between medicine, pharmacology, and cosmetology were often blurred in the ancient world. Historians still argue about the direct authorship of any cosmetic or medical text by Cleopatra herself, while figures like Galen, writing much later, mention recipes attributed to her. It's difficult to verify their authenticity. However, it's entirely plausible that she actively participated in the collection and refinement of such knowledge, perhaps commissioning experiments or directing her physicians and perfumers to create specific preparations for her own use. Her recipe for beauty was therefore likely a dynamic and evolving one, informed by ancient tradition but also by the latest botanical and alchemical knowledge available in her cosmopolitan capital. She wasn't just applying pretty-smelling lotions, she was harnessing the power of the plant kingdom, guided by centuries of accumulated wisdom to enhance her health, her radiance, and her irresistible queenly allure. We've journeyed through Cleopatra's presumed beauty rituals, from her milk baths to her kohl eyeliner, her perfumes to her knowledge of botanical ingredients. But a tantalizing question remains: did she, a queen renowned for her intellect and her meticulous attention to detail, ever formally document her own recipes for beauty? Did she keep a personal compendium of her favorite formulas? or perhaps even author a treatise on cosmetics or pharmacology, you are now imagining a quieter, more scholarly scene. Cleopatra, perhaps in her private study, surrounded by scrolls of papyrus, with inkpots and reed pens at hand, or maybe she's dictating to a scribe, her famous voice outlining not a decree of state, but the precise ingredients and methods for a particularly effective anti-wrinkle cream or a new, enchanting perfume. The mainstream historical fact is that several later writers, most notably the Roman physician Galen, who lived in the 2nd century CE, nearly 2 centuries after Cleopatra, mention or attribute certain medical and cosmetic recipes to Cleopatra. Galen, in his voluminous writings, refers to pharmacological preparations for things like hair loss or skin conditions that were said to have been formulated or favored by a queen named Cleopatra. Whether this was our Cleopatra VII, or perhaps another royal figure of the same common name, or even a legendary attribution, is a matter of debate. However, the association of her name with such texts suggests a persistent tradition linking her to expertise in this area. If such texts did exist, what might they have contained? They could have detailed the exact proportions for her kohl, the best sources for specific grades of myrrh or frankincense, methods for infusing oils with flower essences, or recipes for skin unguents, hair treatments, and perhaps even more medicinal preparations. Given her multilingualism and her access to the Library of Alexandria, she could have drawn upon Egyptian, Greek, and perhaps even Jewish or Eastern sources for her knowledge. It's a fascinating thought, Cleopatra, not just as a user of cosmetics, but as an innovator, a kind of royal cosmetic chemist or pharmacist, meticulously refining and documenting her discoveries. One quirky tidbit is that one of the specific remedies Galen attributes to Cleopatra is a preparation for alopecia, or baldness. Imagine the Queen of Egypt, ruler of a vast kingdom, also taking the time to research and compile effective hair growth formulas. It adds a surprisingly practical, almost relatable dimension to her legendary persona. Conquered Rome today, darling. And by the way, I've finally perfected that rosemary and castor oil blend for thinning hairlines. You should try it. Of course, any actual writings by Cleopatra on cosmetics or medicine are now lost. If they ever existed in a form we'd recognize as a distinct treatise. The Library of Alexandria itself suffered several destructive events over the centuries, and countless ancient texts have vanished. What we have are these later, often secondhand, references. Historians still argue vigorously about the authenticity of these attributions. Was Galen citing genuine recipes that had been preserved and passed down, perhaps within medical or courtly circles? Or was Cleopatra's famous name simply attached to various concoctions later on to give them an air of authority and glamour? Much like a modern celebrity endorsing a perfume they had little to do with creating. It's difficult to say for sure. However, given Cleopatra's known intelligence, her education, her interest in various scholarly subjects, she was said to have written on weights and measures, for instance, and the practical importance of health and appearance for a ruler. It is not at all implausible that she took a direct, intellectual interest in the composition of her own cosmetics and medicines. She might have collaborated with her court physicians and perfumers, experimenting with ingredients, noting what worked best, and perhaps keeping personal records or recipe books for her own use and for the instruction of her trusted attendants. Whether she intended these for wider publication is another question. These might have been closely guarded secrets, part of the mystique of her power and allure. Her recipe for beauty, in this sense, could have been a literal written collection of formulas, a queen's private grimoire of glamour, refined through personal experimentation and informed by the best knowledge her cosmopolitan world could offer. The thought of those lost scrolls detailing the precise secrets of her legendary charm is a tantalizing one indeed. Our journey through the perfumed chambers and botanical gardens of Cleopatra's Alexandria, exploring the myriad ingredients and intricate rituals that contributed to her recipe for beauty, now draws to its gentle, kohl-smudged close. From the milk and honey baths to the Dead Sea minerals, from the exotic fragrances to the strategic application of coal and natural pigments, and from her Ptolemaic inheritance to her own intellectual contributions, we've seen how Cleopatra's allure was a multifaceted, carefully constructed masterpiece. It wasn't just one secret ingredient or one magic potion, it was a holistic approach that blended ancient traditions, keen intelligence, and an undeniable personal charisma. The mainstream historical fact is that Cleopatra VII has remained an iconic figure of beauty, power, and feminine allure for over 2,000 years, inspiring countless works of art, literature, theater, and film. Her image, though filtered through Roman propaganda and later Romantic interpretations, continues to fascinate and captivate the global imagination. Why this enduring legacy part of it? Of course, is the sheer drama of her life story, her liaisons with two of the most powerful men of her age, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, her defiance of Rome, her tragic end. But a significant part of her enduring fame is undeniably tied to her legendary beauty and charm, a recipe that seems to transcend time. Her approach was comprehensive. It wasn't just about superficial adornment. It began with meticulous skincare, using natural ingredients to nurture and protect her complexion. It involved the artistic application of makeup to enhance her features and project an image of divine authority. It extended to the captivating power of fragrance, creating an unforgettable olfactory signature. And it was crowned by her regal hairstyles and headdresses, symbols of her royal and divine status. But, as we've explored, her recipe went deeper. It included her formidable intellect, her multilingual eloquence, her witty conversation, and her ability to command a room, not just with her looks, but with her sheer presence and force of personality. This blend of external allure and internal substance is perhaps the true secret to her lasting legend. One quirky tidbit to reflect upon is how, despite the passage of millennia and the vast changes in beauty standards and cosmetic technology, some of the core principles of Cleopatra's approach still resonate. The use of natural ingredients, the importance of skincare, the idea of beauty as a form of self-expression and empowerment. These are all concepts that feel surprisingly modern. Perhaps that crocodile dung sunscreen we joked about in a hypothetical past episode wasn't on her list, but her emphasis on what worked, drawn from nature and refined by knowledge, certainly was. Her recipe was a testament to understanding the resources available to her, whether botanical, mineral, or intellectual, and using them to their fullest potential. She didn't just accept beauty standards, she actively shaped and deployed her own version of queenly allure for personal and political gain. She understood that beauty, in its broadest sense, was power. As the whispers of Alexandrian court life fade, and the scent of lotus and myrrh dissipates into the quiet of your room, let the image of Cleopatra, in all her calculated splendor, be a soothing one. Her dedication to her own recipe was not mere vanity, but a profound understanding of how to navigate and command her world. Her story, stripped of its most dramatic excesses, becomes one of careful cultivation, of intelligence, and of a woman making the absolute most of the knowledge and resources available to her. There are no ancient ingredients to analyze now, no complex rituals to perform. Just the gentle realization that the pursuit of well-being, of presenting one's best self to the world, is a timeless human endeavor. Cleopatra's methods may have been ancient, her ingredients exotic, but the underlying desire to feel confident, radiant, and empowered is something that connects us across the ages. Let that thought be a comforting presence as you drift deeper into your rest, carried on a perfumed breeze from a long-lost Egyptian night.